How to Steal a Dog, Chapter 12. There's one. I raced across the street. Is it for Willie? Toby called, darting across after me. I squinted up at the sign nailed on the telephone pole. Nope. I sat on the curb and put my chin in my hands. Another cat. So far, the only signs we've seen since yesterday have been for lost cats and yard sales. Toby sat down beside me. Maybe we should look downtown, he said. Maybe she didn't put any signs around here. Maybe, I said, but that seems kind of dumb. I mean, wouldn't you start in your own neighborhood? Me and Toby had been up and down Whitmore Road in nearly every street close by about 1,000,000 times. There wasn't one single sign up for Willie. I just didn't get it. Why wouldn't that lady put up a sign? Let's go back over to Whitmore Road one more time. Toby skipped along beside me, humming. He didn't seem one bit worried. We'd had Willie for almost 2 whole days now, and I was feeling worse by the hour. My dog stealing plans had seemed so good when I first thought of it. Everything had gone just perfect in my head. We steal the dog, we find the sign, we take the dog home, we get the money, the end. But now things didn't seem to be going so perfect. When we got to Whitmore Road, I turned to Toby. Remember, I said, act normal. Don't look guilty or anything. Okay. We strolled along the edge of the road, looking at the fence posts, telephone poles, anything that might have had a sign on it. And then we heard someone calling from behind us. Willie! Toby looked at me all wide-eyed. What should we do? He whispered. Before I could answer, the fat lady was walking towards us. Hey, she called to me and Toby. Hey, I said, and set a smile on my face. Her shorts went swish, swish, swish as she walked. A bright pink t-shirt stretched over her big stomach. Even her feet were fat, bulging over the sides of her yellow flip-flops. Have you all seen a dog? She said. She was breathing hard and clutching her heart like she was going to fall over dead any minute. Nope, Toby practically yelped. I glared at him, then turned back to the lady. What does it look like? I said, squeezing my eyebrows together in a worried way. He's about this big. She held up her hands to show it. He's white with the black eye patch, and his name is Willie. Then she started crying, real hard, like the way little kids cry. I'm sorry, she said, swiping at the tears. I just can't even imagine where he would be. Maybe he ran away, Toby said. Before I could poke him, the lady said, No, not Willie. Her face crumpled up, and she had another full-out crying spell. I'd like to die when she did that. And then, as if something wasn't feeling bad enough, she said, What if something bad's happened to him? Before I could stop myself, I said, You want me and Toby to help you look for him? She sniffed and nodded. Would you? Sure, I poked Toby. Right, Toby? She nodded. Yeah, right. He said. The lady smiled and pulled a tissue out of the pocket of her shorts. She blew her nose, then stuffed the tissue back in her pocket. Strands of damp hair clung to her splotchy red cheeks. Do you all live around here? She said. Me and Toby looked at each other. Sorta, I said. I mean, yeah, we live over there. I pointed in the direction of the street where our car was parked. That wasn't lying, right? I live right there. She pointed to her house. I'll show you all Willie's picture, okay? Me and Toby followed her up the house. At the door, she turned and said, My name's Carmela, by the way. Carmela Whitmore. I'm Georgina, I said. That's my brother, Toby. I'll be right back, she said, and then disappeared into the darkness of the house. I pushed my face against the screen and peered inside. My stomach did a flip-flop. I pressed my face closer to the screen to make sure I was seeing right, and I was. The inside of that house wasn't one little bit like I'd imagined it would be. Ever since I first laid eyes on 27 Whitmore Road, I pictured rooms with glitter crystal, chandeliers, and fancy furniture. I imagined a thick, silky carpet covered with roses, and paintings on the walls, those fancy kind with gold-swirled frames like in the museums. I'd even picture a servant lady bringing in tea and cookies on a silver tray. But what I peered through the door, was a dark, dreary room, bursting with all kinds of junky stuff. Piles of newspapers and clothes, boxes and dishes. No chandelier, no fancy furniture. Carmela came out from the back room carrying a small silver frame. Here's Willie, she said, joining me and Toby on the porch and handed me the picture. This is Willie, looking out for me from the smiling frame, smiling his doggy smile. He sure is cute, I made myself say, but my voice came out real quiet and shaky. Carmela nodded and wiped at the tears. He's the cutest dog you ever saw, she said. And smart. Talk about smart. She smiled down at the picture in my hand. He can count. Can you believe that? Really, Toby said. Carmela nodded. Really, with this little paw. Like this. She pawed the air with her hand. Maybe he got lost, Toby said. Carmela shook her hand. Maybe. But it's just so unlike him. He knows the neighborhood real good, and everybody knows him. She took the picture from me and dropped it into the rocking chair. I can't figure out how the front gate got open, she said. Maybe the paperboy or something, I said. Nah, he just flings it up on the porch. She looked out at the street. I've driven everywhere I can think of. I've called animal control officers. I've talked to my neighbors. I just didn't know what else to do. Then she started crying real hard again. Why don't you put up some signs, I said. Carmela looked at her. Signs? Yeah, you know, lost dog signs. Well, stupid me, she said. Of course I should put up some signs. Me and Toby can help, I said. Right, Toby? Right, Toby grinned at Carmela. That would be great, she said, pushing herself out of the rocking chair with a grunt. Y'all want to come inside? Toby looked at me with wide eyes. We weren't supposed to go in anybody's house unless we knew them real good, but Carmela seemed okay to me. Sure, I said. Come on, Toby. I pulled on Toby's t-shirt. When we got inside, I looked around to see if Carmela's house was really as bad as it looked from the other side, from outside the porch. It was. A big lumpy couch covered with a bedspread and a pile with clothes and newspapers. A coffee table littered with the soda cans and dirty dishes. A card table with a half-finished jigsaw puzzle. Shelves built into the walls were jammed with ratty-looking books, piles of paper, an empty fish tank, and a bowling trophy. Instead of the rose-covered carpets I had pictured, the wooden floors were bare and worn, all nearly everywhere. I looked there with a dog toy, all chewed up, and that almost broke my heart. It made me tell that lady Carmela everything. But of course I didn't. My head was swimming with so many mixed-up thoughts I couldn't get myself to say anything. Carmela shuffled over to the cluttered desk and rummaged through the drawer and pulled out some paper. She took a red marker out of the mason jar on the desk and stared down at the paper. What should I say? She said. How about lost? Little black and white dog named Willie, I said. And then put reward, Toby said. Darn, how come he had to go and say that? It was going to ease into that part, but it's too late now. Reward. Carmela looked confused. I jumped in then, before Toby could. Yeah, I said, that's a good idea, to make sure that people notice and stuff. You mean like money? Carmela stared down at the paper on the desk. Yeah, money. I shot him a look. I wished he'd hush up and let me do the talking. Yeah, money, I said. That would make folks try real hard to find Willie. Gosh, Carmela said, I don't know. She pressed her lips together and kept staring down at the paper on the desk. Then she looked at me and Toby. How much money? $500, Toby blurted out. $500? Carmela kind of swayed a little bit, like she was going to fall over. I haven't got that kind of money. You don't? I said. She shook her head. Then how much reward could you pay for? I said, well, I was thinking like $50. $50, that wasn't enough. I felt Toby watching me. My mind was racing. But before I could think of anything to say, Carmela sat down onto the lumpy couch in a whoosh. Then she shook her head and said, I guess that's not very much, huh? Well, maybe you could get some more, I said. Carmela looked at her lap, down at her lap. Little beads of sweat formed on her upper lip. I could ask for some extra hours at work, she said, but that won't help much. Then she snapped her fingers. I know what. I'll see if I can borrow some money from Gertie. Yeah, Toby said. Then he added, Who's Gertie? My sister. Is she the one that owns this street? Carmela chuckled. Lord knows, she said. She teaches school over in Fayetteville. Then who owns the street? Your daddy or someone? What do you mean, owns the street? Carmela frowned at me. I just figured since your last name was Whitmore. Oh, Carmela said. You mean 'cause this is the Whitmore Road? I nodded. Carmela shook her head. My great-granddaddy owned all this land at one time. She swept her arm out the window. He built this house with his very own hands, brick by brick, she said, and had a big old farm that went out there past the highway. I looked out at the window toward the highway. A bad feeling was starting to fall over me. Maybe I'd gotten this whole thing wrong. Maybe Carmela wasn't rich after all. What happened to the farm? I said. My granddaddy tried to keep it up, but it just got away from him, she said. I guess he wasn't much of a farmer. She shook her head as she gazed out at the window. By the time my daddy got this house, she went on. The only thing left of the family farm was this little old yard and our name up in the street sign. Maybe your daddy could give you some money, I said. He died 8 years ago, Carmela said, and my mama the year after that. Then Gertie moved away. She looked down at the pictures of Willie she was still holding. All I got is Willie now, she said. With that, she started crying again, and I was feeling so heavy it's a wonder I didn't sink right down through the floor. Suddenly, Carmela sat straight up and snapped her finger. You know what? She said. Me and Toby waited. I'm going to call Gertie and borrow some money, she said. Shoot, I'll pay $1 million to get Willie back if I had it. $1 million, Toby said. She nodded. Yep. Then she added, if I had it. So me and Toby watched her make the first sign. Lost. Little black and white dog named Willie. $500 reward. I pressed my lips together so hard to make myself smiling. She wrote 500 on there. This sure was going to work out good, I thought. Then we all sat around the coffee table making more signs. When we had a bunch, Carmela said, There, that ought to do it. You want me and Toby to put up some signs now? I said. Carmela frowned down at the signs in her hand. Well, I guess I feel I ought to wait till I have the money, you know. How long's that going to be? Not long, I hope, she said. I'll call Gertie tonight. She looked down at the dog toy on the floor, a chewed-up rubber slipper. She wheezed a little bit as she bent to pick it up. I think I'll go and drive around some more, she said, turning the slipper over and over on her lap. I can't hardly stand to think about another night without Willie. We'll come back tomorrow, okay? I said. Carmela nodded. Okay. Me and Toby watched Carmela drive away, then raced back to our car to get some food scraps for Willie. I put a biscuit and half a grilled cheese sandwich in a grocery bag, then rummaged through the stuff in the trunk till I found a towel for Willie's bed. Okay, I said, let's go. Willie sure was glad to see us. He wagged and yipped and carried on. When we got up on the porch, he jumped all over us, licking our faces and all. When I opened the grocery bag with scraps, he went crazy. He gulped everything down and licked the bag till there was one crumb left. I put my arm around him and laid my head on top of his. I promise I'm going to take you home, okay? I said. I pulled him onto my lap and stroked his back. He laid his head on my knee and sighed. He looked kind of sad, Toby said. I looked down at Willie. Don't be sad, little fella, I said. He lifted the doggy eyebrow, and I could see what he was thinking right there on his face. Then the tears that I had been trying to hold back for so long came spilling out. What's the matter, Georgina? Toby said. How could I answer that? Should I start with the big red F at the top of my science test today? Or should I just jump into how mean our daddy was to leave us in this mess? And then I should move on to how I felt bad to live in a car with my best friend, while my best friend went to ballet school with someone better than me. Then I could add the part about Willie. How here we were with this cute little dog who never hurt anybody, and now he was all sad and probably scared too. And then there was Carmela, crying and missing her dog so much. And right in the middle of the story of the mess was me, the sorriest person there ever was. When Mama got off work that night, we drove over to Walmart. I waited in the car while her and Toby went inside. I pulled out my notebook and read my notes on how to steal a dog. It sure sounded easy when I read through it. I turned to a fresh page and wrote, April 20th. Step 6. When you find some signs about a lost dog, take him back to the owner. Get the money, and you're done. But, I drew a big circle around the word but. Then I wrote, if there's no signs, you'll have to find the owner of the dog and help them make some signs. While you're doing that, you'll have to practice looking nice and not like a dog thief. Remember to take real good care of the dog so he won't be hungry or sad or anything. Then, I circled the word then, and under it I wrote, you'll have to wait and see what happens next. I stared down at my notes, read the last sentence out loud. After thinking and worrying half the night, I decided that's what I'd do. Just wait and see what happens next.